absolutely keep that net wide. The experience that I got across all the modalities, I think not only has helped me choose my path, what it's done, it's complemented what I do as a reporter. During that time, the Nagasaki atomic bomb went off. He was the on-site doctor on the camp on a daily basis.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Skilled Personnel Network podcast, CrossRoADS series. I'm delighted to be back, and I can't wait for this episode. My name is Fodi Kyriakos, and we have with us...
Hi, I'm Boz. Everyone knows me by now. Reporting radiographer up in Manchester.
Thank you, Boz. And before we introduce our guest, please, as you know, I said from the last one, I'm being told that we need to start to create more awareness, and it is all for radiographers. So please, when you're listening, subscribe to the Skilled Personnel Network YouTube channel, and also please do join the Skilled Personnel Network, which you will find when you search on most search engines. So with us today, I'm delighted to have Val Middleton. Val, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Val Middleton. I'm a consultant radiographer who's been practicing for a significant length of time, for 23 years now. So, wonderful to be here, and thank you for the invite.
It's an absolute pleasure. Well, we have been threatening this for a little while, Val. I'm absolutely delighted to have you join Boz and I. We want you to start us back to the beginning. How you got into radiography? What was the perhaps the motivations behind it? And certainly, if anything else, was it your first route into? Was it your first thoughts on what you was going to do professionally?
Okay, so going right back to the beginning, from when I was tiny, I grew up in a rural community with my dad as the local GP, my mum as the practice nurse. We grew up in the fields, etc. But with that, we also grew up with a 24/7 phone in our home that we answered to patients. So from the outset, I was always very focused on working with people and in healthcare. And I'm not going to lie and flower it and go from day one, I wanted to do radiography, because that's not true. I just knew I wanted to go into healthcare. So with that, as my education sort of progressed, and I did my GCSEs and then my A-levels. My A-levels, I'm not going to lie, they weren't focused in healthcare. So I did biology, just giving people an idea, biology, geography and art. Well, you wouldn't necessarily put that in a radiography world. So for me, my strongest subject was art. So actually at the time, that was my first CrossRoADS, because I was like, right, okay, so do I go down the sort of artistic paint for a living, or do I go down the healthcare that I've always wanted to? So actually what I did, because my A-levels didn't go quite as I'd hoped, my highest grade was art. So I'm just trying to demonstrate that you've just got to keep determined. So yeah, in a word, basically, I ended up doing radiography on the basis that that's who'd have me in healthcare. So my grades weren't what I'd hoped, but what I did hope was that, okay, academically, I wasn't top of the class, but growing up, I did an awful lot of other things, including answering the phone at home to patients. So yeah, so that's how I got into it, really.
Wow. Where did you study, Val?
So I studied at Cranfield University, so the Royal Military College of Science. It's quite a unique setup.
Wow.
In Shrivenham, near Swindon. And with that, I did placements in Oxford and Reading, which gave me a real diverse opportunity to see, the big acutes, but also the smaller, more sort of district general setups. So yeah, it was unique because I was training on a military base, That course no longer exists for obvious reasons, for security reasons, really. But what it did do is exposed me to how to manage situations that you're faced with that you wouldn't necessarily have in a hospital, if that's the way of putting it. So how to navigate, for example, those that were in the forces on the front line. How do radiographers, because I was training with radiographers that were who were commissioned. So actually what it did do is gave me a real insight as to how to navigate difficult situations. So yeah,
that you wouldn't face here. That's quite a good experience. Because now you'd have to sign up to have those discussions, whereas you had it as an external. That's why I bet that was fascinating.
It was, and from a sort of a traditional side, some of the, bless them, the old majors and colonels, whatever, that were teaching us, that were radiographers of old, they had a really traditional approach to the way of teaching. Sometimes, now it potentially would be maybe a little bit frowned upon because it wasn't, textbook, but actually I learned so much from it because it dotted around, and so I was learning on a military base, which was a little bit different.
Obviously, I think I've got potentially kindred spirits with you two. Because I was surprised that even though I think you both may have some deja vu that you might know each other, but actually, Boz, I think about your military family background, and Val, I hear yours. And what intrigues me is how you've seen that shape your direction of your career, because I hope you both don't mind me saying, but you're quite natural leaders and you have gravitated into leadership type roles. So, I don't know, do you see some of that being part of the background of, the sort of family background and so on, the military stuff?
Yeah, I do, to be honest. I think sort of the leadership side is something that, yes, okay, I didn't get the best grades at school, but what I did get was a lot of experience in public speaking, in debating, amateur dramatics, all that sort of stuff that was the added value to my school life rather than just the academic. Now, obviously, you need the academic. It goes without saying, I say to my own children. But the other stuff is so important as well. And the leadership side, I think, through the years has definitely stood me in good stead now. Definitely.
I'd have to agree. I think coming from a similar point of view, that I didn't even do A levels. I went through the access course route, but coming from a family that each one of my 4 uncles was born in a different country on a different base, and my grandfather was very so they were all non-commissioned officers. They were all sergeants, and they're all had a very different way of interacting with everyone, that they kind of translated their army life into their everyday. And some of the things, when they came back from the Falklands, that affected them so much that their interpersonal skills were actually I talk about it fairly often, an anti role model. That it was they were teaching me not to be like that, and how. So I've almost gravitated away from how they did things, but at the same time, it gave me the experience in talking to people who don't want to be led, because he's a leader. They were at the front of their men going in and things like that, and being able to translate that into being kind of leading from the front. I'm a doer. I don't want to lead by pushing people from the back. I get it done. I want to do it. And I think it has definitely had an impact.
Yeah, I think throughout my career, I definitely put my heart on my sleeve, in the sense that I'd like to think I lead by example. So a lot of my reporting career and navigating the challenges of that and things, actually showing people what I can or can't do, and actually navigating it in a way that, as you describe, allows you to pick the good bits of qualities, and learning from family members, but also learning from peers and just the wider community, whether that be within the healthcare setting or not. So yeah, I think the leadership side, probably from quite a young age, I really enjoyed, and it was just me. So yeah.
Yeah. So Val, given you didn't go down the usual route of qualifying, usually, so how did you go about choosing your first position? How did that come about? Your first actual role post graduation? Because presumably you didn't have too many people on your course, right?
No, there was, so there was how many? Probably maybe 40, something like
40.
that. So
Oh,
there
okay.
was a decent number. There was only one within that was actually in the forces at the time, was in the RAF. But the rest we were all civilians. Now, interestingly, a number of us now, a number of us have gone into leadership roles with just the thing. So I think one of the factors for me, so Cranfield, where I went, was one of only 2 universities that would accept me for an application.
Look at that.
Okay.
So I applied to 6, same as everybody else you do when you apply to university. However, there was only 2. Portsmouth, they offered me a 4-year course because I wasn't bright enough to do their 3-year course.
Uh-huh.
And I got the levels I got my art and I got my biology and geography, but they were CDE, so they weren't the best grades. So Cranfield was the only one that I had a face-to-face interview. So when I was thinking about talking to you today, I was like, well, actually, do you know, I think that says something about me, is that it isn't always what you are on paper.
100%.
And actually that has shaped my career, because I've ended up going to university, the only one that would have me, to do radiography. And as a result of that, in answer to your question, where I ended up after it was, so I did all my training in the Oxford and Reading hospitals.
Yeah.
With that, I was largely centred around the Churchill Hospital in Oxford and the Royal Berks in Reading. Now, both hospitals obviously sizable, and both gave me opportunity, but obviously that didn't incorporate the John Radcliffe at Oxford at that time. So I wasn't trauma related in Oxford. I also got experience at the Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre in Oxford, and what was the neurological hospital, the Radcliffe in Oxford as well. So with that, when I qualified, I loved the city, and there was, at the time when I qualified, there was a real shortage of radiographers, like real shortage. So you could pretty much go anywhere. And when I qualified, in Oxford, they recruited 15 of us that were all newly qualified.
Oh, wow.
So we all started at the same time, but there was also a bit of a carrot at the time that if you, at a point of arriving and working for the trust, you were given £1,000. And then if you stayed at least a year, you got another £1,000. Well, I'm not going to lie, that was quite attractive, along with the fact that I liked the city and the job was at the John Radcliffe, which I hadn't had the experience at. I've done elective, done main placement there. And there was so much opportunity there. So not only did I have the opportunity to experience all modalities at a really sort of high level, I believe, it really did give me experience to a level that I will never forget. But also it gave me the social side of what was when I qualified. There was 15 of us that all qualified and were there earning cash for the first time and enjoying ourselves.
It bonds you,
But
doesn't it, as well?
yeah, and so those first, I was there for nearly 2 years. Well, no, a bit longer actually. And with that, oh my God, I got so much experience. It really did. Even from the point of view of, so I did nuclear medicine within everything else. So I did all modalities, but I used to do lab work, radioisotope drawing up and all the rest of it in nuclear medicine. That I nearly went down the nuclear medicine route, but the opportunities and what I could see from a trauma perspective at the John Radcliffe, I got a real buzz from doing night shifts and doing the plain films and the CT and running down the corridor with a trolley because somebody's gone off or whatever it may be. That was why I took my first role at the John Radcliffe in Oxford.
You've segued really nicely there, you see, Val, because as you know, this is CrossRoADS, the series CrossRoADS, I think that what we're trying to inspire is different stories and inspirations of how people took decisions down their career and how, so that other people can listen to this and take from it something that they may be able to drive forward in their own career. This notion that the emergency medicine aspect of radiography, I've seen it throughout our discussions about how you've seen various pathways, you envisioned radiography pathways in various ways. So I'm keen to understand from your perspective then, with reporting, at what stage did that become something that you wanted to, the line that you wanted to go down?
So I did a red dot module as part of which was something that was quite new at that point, as part of my undergraduate degree at Cranfield. So I really enjoyed that. It was probably my highest grades within my degree. And then, so I looked at it and enjoyed it from the outset. So right from the very beginning when I was training as an undergraduate. Then when I was at the John Radcliffe, they got reporting radiographers, and at that time that was quite a new concept. I enjoyed working with them. I always wanted to learn more. I wasn't somebody who, I'd like to think I take pride in the images that I take. And my artistic side comes out there because I'm quite a stickler for making them pretty. How sad is that?
No.
No, you see, Boz, you get it.
I get it. Yeah.
And I definitely, I take pride in those images. So with that, I want to be able to look at them and then actually look that bit further and see if there's, an abnormality of some form and actually start questioning what it is. So right from the beginning, I had that. However, what I did do is when I started out with John Radcliffe, because there were so many more modalities and opportunities to try everything you can think of within imaging, which I did, everything from cardiac angio to, I don't know, your fracture clinic or your emergency care or whatever it may be. All of these things, I went and experienced them all, but then, and don't laugh too hard, because I decided after I'd done 2 years in Oxford, I'd got loads of experience, and I decided it was time for me to go around the world. So I packed in my NHS job and I worked as an agency radiographer. My first port of call was Salford in Manchester.
Yeah, sunny Salford. I'm gonna travel the world. Where shall I go? I'll go to Salford.
So wait for the next bit. So I arrived in Salford. I'd not been there very long. I went on holiday, just a Brits abroad holiday in Spain. I met my husband. Well, say no more. I never
The
got
rest is
any
history.
further. I got no further than Salford, but what an opportunity it was, and it was meant to be
I mean,
because.
looking out the window in Salford, it's sunny,
Oh,
so
what?
it's
Oh,
a
is that where
rarity.
you are? Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't really, I didn't know that. But yeah, there
yeah.
we go. Maybe that's where we've met before. So, so yeah, so I was in Salford and I was settled in the department. I was still agency, but actually there was a reporting radiographer role that came up. And well, actually, no, it wasn't. It was a lead for the ED X-ray department, and with them, the trained to do reporting. So I did that. So I stayed in Salford. So my trip around the world got as far as Salford.
Cheap flights, cheap flight.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but that flight to Spain was quite expensive. So
Yeah,
I got
cost you a wedding.
so exactly. So yes. So I settled in Manchester for some time with that, and I did my initial reporting qualifications at St Martin's in Lancaster. So
Okay.
although I was working at Salford, that's where I did my reporting. So I did all MSK there, appendicular and axial, and that was back in 2003. Yes, I'm that old. And yeah, so I guess that was the next crossroads really, because how
Yeah.
it could have been, it would have looked very different.
Yeah,
Wow. Sliding doors,
it's
that was.
amazing how just being somewhere at the right time, you just happen to be. I think that resonates with me as well because I decided when I qualified at a district general, but wanted something more and wanted that trauma centre experience, and I joined Manchester Royal Infirmary,
Okay, yeah.
Salford's competitor for the trauma centre of Manchester.
That's where my husband worked. So yeah, so I get it.
And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time when chest reporting came up there, and it's funny how your plans just go to the wayside all the time.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of that, I think sometimes it's just taking opportunities when they present themselves. You
Yeah,
cannot. It's hard at the time sometimes when maybe at times in your career you get a little frustrated or whatever it may be, but it's sort of biding your time until the right thing does come along. And sometimes you're never going to find the perfect, but actually it's just taking the opportunities. Like when I was in Salford, I also did, PACS, super user training. I was very involved in PACS. And when we sort of moved from film to CR and then DR, all of those parts of my career have definitely sort of, because I, at the outset, wanted to learn more about the new technologies, etc. Actually, I'm a very practical person, so it worked me being a super user in these settings. And that, I think, even now and today, helps me when we're talking about whether it be AI or whether it be ensuring that we can make sure that equipment gives you the best images possible, rather than just relying on the fact that there's a button that you can press that's small, medium, and large, whatever it may be.
yeah.
So thinking about it just a little bit more.
Going back to that your experience when you first qualified and being able to try those different specialties across the board, even though you kind of had an inkling of which direction you were going to go. How important do you think that is to people who, because I advise people when they're asking me, oh, how do I get into reporting when they're still students? I say, don't, if you like that, that's great. Keep that at the back of your mind, but go and try everything else as well, because you may like something that you don't even have access to yet, you haven't seen yet. And also take those little opportunities, like you said, become super users and things. I was IR rep for a little bit, for the society, and that opened a few more doors into
Yeah.
kind of the management side of things. And becoming super users, you get access to different groups of people as well. Are you an advocate for choosing a path and sticking to it, or even though you think you know what you want to do, keeping that net wide?
Absolutely. I am absolutely keep that net wide. The experience that I got across all the modalities, I think not only has helped me choose my path, what it's done, it's complemented what I do as a reporter. So, for example, I've got, I guess, more inexperienced colleagues who haven't got any of that. And when they're sort of using, so for example, you're reporting, I don't know, chest. So let's work on chest. So reporting your chest, and actually you want to look at the previous CT or whatever it may be. A lot of them, because they haven't actually gone through CT or any form of cross-sectional imaging, they're reporting the plain film, but they actually haven't got the full rounded concept of what that anatomy is. Now, one of the things that I learnt, and I don't know how much different, I don't think there's a lot of this that goes on now, but sort of actual physical dissection within training and understanding anatomy, etc. I did that as part of my undergraduate degree, and I think that massive help to me. I know some people it's not for them. However, using all the other modalities and being able to have had experience in them all, I like to think I've got some sort of informed guidance as to what a clinician should do with the patient next, rather than basing it on books and what I'm being told. So in a word, I personally feel it's really important. And I have, in recent times, actually, a friend who is also a radiographer. She is got a fantastic career, doing really, really well. And she said, there's just one thing that if I could do it again, I'd do what you did and got experience across the whole raft first before channeling into what I am, just for exactly that reason. So in answer to your question, yes, nothing is off limits, but at the same point, I think there also comes a time where you have to accept that you can't do everything.
I
there's a fine line.
I think though there's too much at the moment of band watching, I call it. It's they don't actually think about what they want to do. They just want to climb to the next band, and that's usually from plain film to CT. And that gap between qualification and jumping into a specialty is shrinking massively. I think gone is you have to be qualified 2 years or 5 years, things like that. It's more who you are, and I think that those skills that you gain just from experiencing all the different modalities or staying in plain film and going through the trauma stuff and getting to go to theatre and I think that the skills gap down the line of, as you said, translating those modalities between each other, I think is going to come back and bite people.
I do totally agree, and I don't like to be cynical about a sort of more recent approach to the profession. I don't like to be cynical. However, I do feel really strongly that I think, as you described, we've got a scenario where people are wanting to progress as quickly as possible, which I do understand. I do get it.
100%.
Even from a financial point of view, the challenges of that, and people trying to provide for families or just provide for themselves and actually live the life that I did when I was newly qualified and had the time of my life. So, you know, I think all of that, but I do believe that by expediting as such our approach to reporting particularly, so the talk around having a 4th year to have a reporting qualification, I currently don't think that setup is a good idea. Reason being is that the contents of what is being jam-packed into those 4 years is so huge.
Yeah.
And I think experience is key. And that's not an old school approach, I don't think, but I think it's fact. How to manage a clinician who presents you with challenge to your report. How do you navigate that? It's not so much around the content of what the image is showing you, it's the challenges that come with it. And I think by doing and just adding on a 4th year, all we're going to do is exacerbate the issue of being machines.
Yeah.
Because we're just going to keep going with the numbers. And actually, we should be able to provide, for many years, we've talked about actionable reports and all the rest of it, and there's all the buzzwords we use for that. But actually, it's around being able to work with the clinicians to come up with a conclusion and not always be saying, oh, for example, chest x-ray, come back in 6 weeks because I'm not quite sure. And actually, if I say that, then the next person, they'll have to make the call. So, because I think there is some of that. And we're actually increasing workloads by doing that, and the patients are having some serious numbers of images performed, but also the apprehension that comes with it. So yeah, a long way round answering your question, but I hope I think we're aligned.
Yes, very much so.
I mean, Val, interestingly, what we're talking about now, and Boz and I've discussed this quite often, is around role models and people that we've looked up to in our career and how they've shaped what we do. Because now, if we're thinking about, and I spoke to someone the other day who said that, you know, she's seen more and more applications from radiographers with 6 months qualification, post qualification of their graduating as newly qualified now. Applying for the reporting course, and obviously now there's more funding available and it's more accepted. But she said, you know, proceed with. She wants to proceed, but we proceed with caution. And I think a lot then goes into the environments that they go back into, and how much they're environments that allow things like radiographer reporting to flourish. I mean, we could really dig into that, but one of the questions I wanted to ask you is how much have certain people in your career role models really shaped your direction and also your confidence in the profession, in your practice?
Yeah, so at every stage of my career.
Plug away. We don't mind plugging away.
Okay, we'll plug away. I'm not going to lie. There have been people along the way, and I've already mentioned about the reporters at the JR, John Radcliffe, when I was there. They were a fantastic team that I saw how they worked and what was a potential option for the future, and gone, yes, I quite like the idea of that. However, at that point, it wasn't a case of, come on, Val, get on board, because I needed to go and get more experience. And that's when I was going around the world, but that, you know, that ended quick. But talking about Salford was a very influential part of my career, because obviously that's where I got the opportunity to do reporting. But from a role model point of view, there was absolutely role models there. And I will plug this person because they're just ace, is Elaine Quick.
Yeah.
So she was fantastic, and fair, nurturing role model who was honest and nurtured your good points, and allowed me to get the experience in reporting, but also navigate the challenges of what that brings. Because it's not so much the case now, because there's more of us reporting, but back then the numbers of us reporting weren't many, so you've got a lot of opposition from different radiologists, different professions, in fact, and clinicians that are requesting images. I'm not reading a radiographer's report. You must be joking. I've had a radiologist in my career say to me, when they found out I was going to do chest reporting, that was in 2010. Yeah, 2010 I did chest and abdo. They said to me, no, they've seen me report for years doing MSK. Yeah. They went, no, I've trained to do this for years. I'm not happy. And they proper stripped me down with, and I was like, oh, so you're not going to even assist me? They were like, no, absolutely not. So the navigating that was a challenge, but actually what that radiologist did do after I'd navigated and trained and whatever to do that, I still didn't back off from asking them questions. But I think what I did was demonstrated what I could do. Yeah. And they actually came back to me probably year or so later and went, do you know what? I owe you an apology because I was wrong. And I said, well, thank you, because that really does mean an awful lot. So even from a role model point of view, that's not somebody who you'd think would think, but it's really stuck in my mind with, nothing is off limits, but it's learning to respect people's opinions, but also their level of expertise, because they were really, really, really experienced radiologists. But then the other challenge is, so when I was doing my chest reporting, I had multiple radiologists inputting, which I think is really important, to have multiple reporters in whatever form inputting. And I think the ideal nowadays is a combination of radiologists and advanced practice roles to input, give us a real diverse level of knowledge, really, I guess, and resource. Is I was in a situation where I got two very strong characters as radiologists. I was going through my portfolio with my mentor, who was one of them, and they disagreed with some of the reports that the other radiologist had disagreed with, but they agreed with me and not the other radiologist. So they said to me, come with me. I was like, oh, this isn't going to end well. So I was taken to the office of the other radiologist. It was exactly that. And both strong characters. And honestly, that was such a turning point for me, because I stood there and I listened to the confrontation, basically saying, no, I don't believe you. I believe Val. I'm not, and actually, we were all, whether we were a radiographer or a radiologist, we all had an opinion. And I was thinking, do I share mine or do I not? It's obviously already on paper, so but I did. And I think that actually, by showing them respect, but also giving an informed conclusion of my own, they were able to respect me as a reporter and a person to work with. So it doesn't happen overnight, and I think there are still challenges, and I think I've gone probably off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think this is a really important point, is that we as a profession, I think as reporters, if we do work towards being simply number crunchers and doing a good job, but not quality job of reporting, if that's the way, so an accurate job, but not quality, we are actually doing ourselves a disservice with the radiology profession, because they're looking at it going, actually, are they literally just, and I do call reporting spot the difference, because it is. And it is as simple as that. And I am concerned about the way we as a profession are displaying ourselves to our medical colleagues. So yeah, that was a bit around the houses, but I think that's a point I wanted to share.
It's a big discussion. I was having it yesterday. We had this get together of our chest there was 2 chest reporting radiographers and the 3 chest radiologists at the hospital. We happened to be. It was about AI, the meeting, but it was broached whether Manchester was ever going to have a centralised reporting pot. So, and one of the main concerns raised by the radiologists is they wouldn't want it, in that they know the reporters that they're working with, myself and my colleagues, and they've had input into our report structures and things like that. And other hospitals, they wouldn't want their reporters, because the reports are numbers, just numbers.
Do you know what's interesting there, though, and that probably takes off on a bit of another thing, is I think, sadly, the private sector has done us no favours with that, because what we've ended up doing is recruiting, in some instances, number crunching, and what then radiologists within departments within the NHS particularly, they're looking at it and going, well, actually, I'm not happy with the quality of that. Yep. I'll stick with my own, thank you. And that's exactly what they're doing. And unfortunately, I think it's actually probably doing a disservice for, as I've already talked about, the profession, but also what the private sector is demonstrating. So for me, we need to ensure that all reports across the profession are of a standard that radiologists look at them and go, yeah, good job.
I think that's something the private sector can do better.
Yeah.
Is obviously we need to get those reports done. So there is a number crunching aspect. However, you don't pick the fastest reporters or the people that can get through the most. You need someone who is going to give the people you're reporting for, that it's a service to the patients at the end of it. And I think there needs to be a bit more of a, okay, you've done 6 billion reports or whatever, but how many of them actually help? And that balance needs to be. I think it happens in the NHS as well. There are
absolutely does. Of course, it does.
And I think the people in charge of the reporting pools or the reporting services and things like that, the NHS is too run on numbers and goals, and which we need. We need those goalposts, but it can't just be those. We're moving away from the care side of healthcare, in my opinion, in some instances, because we're trying to do too much. And that quality, as you mentioned, it needs a bit more thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being very generalised about it, but actually, I think what unfortunately is happening, because of people's sort of backlogs, etc., trusts are having to outsource. And with that outsource, that is, so a radiologist, like you described, that's trained their own, that's got confidence in what you as a reporter are, they're happy with that. Now, if they're then sort of have their hand behind the back being pushed to outsource, and the reports that are coming back aren't particularly great, and they're coming from a pool that is seen as somewhere that reports everywhere across the country, it automatically tarnishes what is the reporting radiographer workforce out there. And it's really, really sad that that's the case. So for me, I think it's a case of ensuring that the education that we give our undergraduates and postgraduates is to a level that makes them aware of exactly these challenges from the outset.
Yeah.
Would be my thought.
Doesn't matter who you're working for.
Yeah.
You're still representing the profession as a whole.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm fairly certain I'm guilty for taking us down this rabbit hole when I spoke about the 6 months of qualification. But, you know, it's interesting because, and this is a big point to raise for everyone who's out there listening, is that what you described about that debate that happened during your reporting of the chest x-rays, Val, is that you've got amongst everyone, every profession, but I'm acutely aware more because of my experience working with reporting radiographers, two types of radiologists that would look at you doing the chest x-rays at that very time, and you have the true skeptics and you have the over my dead bodies. And whether we like it or not, the over my dead bodies will have whether it's a principle, an ideology, a belief, whatever it is, no matter what you did and what you do, that's just how it is. And that's, when I say it's okay, you can't change everyone. That's why we're all very, very different. But in scenarios like what you just described, you know, I can picture the true skeptic talking to the over my dead body, and the true skeptic's going, well, wow, Val's got a point here. And throughout everyone's careers, I mean, and this is a lesson for myself as well when I was setting up rig reporting, is that, you know, I spent quite a bit of time trying to convince them over my dead bodies when I should have been spending more time with true skeptics. But I got to understand that point and learn it and realise that over time, the over my dead bodies would become fewer and fewer, and to the point at which they're either at the end of their career or they're just not being heard. And the problem with it is they could be a most amazing people, almost to look up to professionally as well. I think, wow, you know, what have they done? But it's just unfortunate that everyone's got their own ideologies. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist in radiography, by the way, because obviously we could get into the whole assistant practitioner route and whatever. But when
no, that's not just a rabbit hole. That's like that's
a black hole.
Yeah, that's a cave.
So it is, but it's really interesting hearing these things. Sorry,
just quickly though. No, just quickly. I just want to say though, I think, so this has been a topic of conversation for many, many years, hasn't it? I mean, way back to when I first qualified, absolutely no doubt. However, I think the point for me right now, and I'll keep it brief, is that we are in debt. I feel we've come out the other side of that. We've got reporting radiographers all over the country. We've got consultant radiographers. We're progressing things internationally as a profession, all the rest of it. However, what concerns me is we are in danger of going backwards because of the expediting of training, of trying to keep it as minimal as possible to get bums on seats, to then need to just get numbers through, which I absolutely get, because we do need to get the numbers through, but let's not compromise the quality of what we do.
Yeah, no, completely agree.
Both in specialty and in just undergraduate training.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, education, we haven't really touched on it during this as yet. Education right from the outset, you know, even when I was an undergraduate, I always enjoyed teaching, sharing knowledge, and that has absolutely been a way that I've navigated my extended learning, really, because for me, educating makes you think. It puts you on the spot, and it takes you to that next level.
Absolutely. In a skilled personnel first, I'm just going to put you on mute because I'm going to ask something of someone, so bear with me.
What was I saying? What was I saying about walking?
Yeah, he's had enough. He's gone. Do you know what?
Yeah,
I'm done.
I don't blame him. He thinks we're having a go at him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
My
didn't hear
wife's
that,
very
did you,
happy with
Polly?
me on Valentine's Day.
What's your
Sorry.
wife just bought you some flowers?
No, I said she's not very happy with me on Valentine's Day.
Oh,
Won't be the first time I'm upset, and she's still in earshot. Thank you, darling. She's talking about kids. You know, we got a bit more time now, and because Val, honestly, this is fascinating for me, as just hearing you both describe, you know, some of the interesting nuances of the way that, you know, you tracked your career into reporting, the things that, you know, I think cautionary tales, as we've used the term before, but cautionary tales of entering into things. I want to very quickly mention to you about the challenge I think outsourcing does have, because I think, you know, we've raised the point, and I agree with a lot of what you're both saying. I think what I will say is, on the other side, having been someone who provides services to the NHS, there's this really, I call it dangerous race to the bottom with price, and I get it, where the managers are under the most immense pressure, and I speak to them on a daily basis now. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be in a budgetary meeting because of the amount of discussions there must be about the challenges faced. But so therefore, that then has a knock-on effect on the providers, and a dangerous race to the bottom. And what I would debate is, unless the organisations can become so much more streamlined that they're able to become more efficient, the danger with race to the bottom is what I would call innovation and being able to do additional things. What ends up happening is that there is a lot of just reporting as a value add from an outsourcer. So we are going to get our numbers down from an outsource provider, and that's going to help us reset the reporting numbers, backlogs or waiting lists. The problem is that it ends up becoming very transactional, and I don't like that. As a provider to the NHS, I think, how can we do more for our trust? How can we, for our clients, for our customers, for our reporters, things like mentoring, things like additional support, other than just the reporting numbers? And, you know, I hear far too often, and this is something we could definitely do better as in the outsourced sector, if you like, is that the royal we is that the outsourcers could create more familiarity between reporters and the reporters at the sites, so the reporters that are doing the reports in the outsourcers and the trusts, because I hear far too often that reports are getting re-reported because they don't know the name of the reporter, and my word, that is, I mean, why on earth would you bring an outsourced provision in only to have it re-reported again? I mean, that's, you know, and then you think about wastage.
I think there's a lot of that, though. I really do. So, for example, MDTs that I sit on,
Yeah.
there are some scenarios that, we saw it was reported by an outsourcing company, so actually, can we just take a look for me? And actually, what is that doing? I'm not convinced that. I think we've got. For me, I absolutely get it. Does come down to money, of course it does. There's absolutely no doubt. But I think it's like I've already described. It's that leading by example and showing what you can do, and demonstrating, I don't know, accuracy figures, follow-up figures, all these sorts of things, and actually trust being able to look at it and go, okay, so this outsourcing company have only, you know, followed up so many chest x-rays. This outsourcing company hasn't. Have we got any, you know, because actually inexperienced follow-ups as such, we all do it. We all have to pull them back at points. But if we do it too much, we're creating a workload that actually doesn't necessarily need to be there. The patient experience isn't what it should be, because they've got 6 weeks of prevention as to what was on that initial chest X-ray. However, we're in a situation where, how do you demonstrate as a private company that and I think it is by being able to demonstrate what that service is and the quality service. But at the same point, so going all the way back to my point around, actually, what we need to do is not do the profession a disservice.
Absolutely.
So not take us back to where we were, where we've got all those skeptics around reporting and stuff. Because all we're doing is actually feeding those thoughts. But actually, I think we could actually take them the other way. So actually, on the topic of CrossRoADS, I think as a profession, we're at one. And we need to be really careful how we navigate it.
I mean, separating out this I do think becomes the independent and the private sector's challenge, Val, is absolutely to think how can we ensure that what we're doing is not just promoting, but actually moving forward the services that we're contracting with. And my example is, and I'll never forget it, I once read in one of the trade magazines an article that stuck with me because it was right at the height of when I was working with reporting, and it likened outsourcing to the drug dealer feeding the drug addict. I know it was harsh. It was seriously on the edge. I'm like, whoa, Yeah,
absolutely. So when I was knocking outsourcing, but actually, I was, I hope, constructively doing that with potential options. However, that is just rude.
I was at first thinking, wow, but when the sort of shock sunk in, what I then realised is, deep down, there's an actual point to this, and the point is a lot of what you just described, which is that as outsourced providers, there is a responsibility to fix your customers. To help fix. I mean, sometimes there's a lead a horse towards a scenario, which is, well, it's up to your customer to fix the problem, and we're just here trying to sort of plug a gap. But actually, within all of that, I'm like, wow, this person in a really shock and awe way has got a point. The point is that actually there should be a point at which you can really put your hand up as a third party provider and go, wow, we really helped fix a problem, and we've come away, and we can go and now do it somewhere else with a case study of what we've done here, and we can show. And so, drug dealer, drug addict, bit harsh, but actually, I can see the notion. I can see what they're trying to say is that actually we should be doing more to try and fix the issue.
No, I absolutely. I mean, I think it's just really important for the profession that the private and NHS sectors work together on that, and not see it as an opposition, but just a togetherness. So that's my thoughts on that.
Definitely.
Another rabbit hole we've gone down.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Val, we spoke pre-recording about some pretty amazing backstory to your family, your ancestors, and we are going to do another podcast on it because it is literally that amazing. But if you can, I just want to hear your story, your grandfather's story, because for me, it's just the most incredible. I mean, however many years later, we see you doing what you're doing, and yet, yeah, when I heard that story, I was blown away.
Yeah, it's a story that, and I guess going all the way back to how I got into radiography, it's not that I saw my grandfather and thought I've got to do what he did. It's far from that, really. So, just talking about my ancestry. So, my grandfather was he trained as a medical practitioner at Barts in London back in, I think it was about 1941 or something like that. He qualified. Shortly afterwards, not all that long afterwards, war broke out, and he was then he went into the Navy quite relatively soon at the start of the war. I think about 42, I think 43, whatever it was. He was captured. His boat was sunk. He actually even held on to what was a life raft back then for, I think, overnight, nearly 24 hours. And he was then rescued, or whatever you want to call it, by the Japanese. He was then taken to a camp in Japan, which then he was moved 6 months later to Nagasaki, the camp there, and he remained there for the rest of the war. During that time, the Nagasaki atomic bomb went off. He was the on-site doctor on the camp on a daily basis. He was looking after, he was looking after all of the people there. He was trying to say to the Japanese, they can't go out to work today, and they just overrule him all the time. While he was there, he wrote a diary to keep his own sanity, really, about ideas of construction, etc. So when the war ended, and my grandmother didn't actually know if he was alive or not until I think he was missing for over a year. But wow. He came back home, and obviously he'd seen a lot during that time, and the connection with radiology then began, which is he decided that radiology was for him rather than going and physically seeing patients so much in the same way that he had done prior to the war, and then obviously during his time whilst imprisoned. So he took it upon himself. He liked experimenting. All of these stories have come from my father, who was his eldest son, and did end up following up in his footsteps as a GP himself, training at Barts. Well, actually, he did anaesthetics first. But with that, my father, at a very young age, grew up with his father making mobile X-ray version of what is evolving as we speak in current day. So he had an X-ray, from what my father said, he bought a suitcase within which he got his X-ray machine, anode, cathode, whatever, all of the actual tube itself. But then he made a trailer to put on the back of his car that was to do all the processing. And one of the stories that my father has told me about is he will never forget, he went to the local hardware store to get a piece of drain pipe for some of the chemicals to pass from A to B within his trailer, etc. So some of the X-rays that he took at that time, we still have. So wow. I found in my father's house an X-ray actually of my gran pregnant, and the whole thing. And I looked at it and I was like, this is seriously overexposed. And there's a baby in there.
I was going to say, that was your first thought.
So
that's incredible.
So we still have all of this. We still have all the
health and safety and radiation protection has come on since then.
It has, and you could argue it says a lot about me if my dad was experimented on or whatever. but you know, the story, and I look back with so much admiration for
That's incredible.
what my grandfather did, but then obviously my father went on, and that's where I got from my mum and dad, as I've already said, the sort of first to want to go out and work in healthcare. But my grandfather, he, as my father tells me, he very much enjoyed how I was tinkering, if that's the way of putting it, with how
Yeah.
things work. And one of the things because sadly he died 9 years after he returned from war from a brain hemorrhage suddenly. So he never got to complete what was his plan with the X-ray car. So it was still in construction when he passed away. But my he was the eldest son. He's got loads of memories of that, although he was only young. And I forgot what I was going to say at that point, but basically, yeah, I've got a lot of admiration for it. And looking back now, I see a real duty to share what he did. That's what I was going to say. So at the time around when he passed away, he was actually experimenting with the tube and moving it to see if he could do some form of what we now know to be tomography and ultimately computed tomography.
That's amazing.
And all of these things, I mean, as I say, my dad is of a similar, he likes working out how things work and trying to make things work or break them to then have to mend them to whatever it is. So yeah, I've got an awful lot of admiration, and that really, maybe it's in my blood, going right back.
The radiation.
yeah, and exactly. And joking aside, you know, that's such sensitive time when he was back in Nagasaki. He wrote an article in a local newspaper, which we found, which actually talks about when the bomb went off. And he talks about where he was sitting at a desk at the front of what was their ward in a fashion in the camp. And he heard a big bang as such and a flash of light. But it didn't happen straight. So that if he heard and saw the flash of light and thought it was a mirror or something, and then all of a sudden, all the windows went, everything, you know, sort of 30 seconds later. So that was when the bomb was dropped. And from the geography of the area where the camp was, there was actually a hill between where the bomb went off and where my grandfather was in the camp. Had that hill not been there, I wouldn't be here today, because that saved them. So, and actually from stories from my father, he was taken by the Japanese after the bomb had gone off to the area that, not right to the centre, obviously, because I definitely wouldn't be here, but to go and maybe assist to see if there's anything they could do for any of the Japanese that were injured in the process. So all in all, my ancestry has got a lot of radiation association, if that's the way of putting it.
That's incredible.
We are going to really bring that story
follow-up episode.
Yeah, that is just, honestly, it's incredible. Val, I think the point you made, interestingly, about your grandfather having the X-ray car, and we think about the innovation that we're looking at now with the Fujifilm X-Air, the car, the ultra portable car, and how we're looking at that as being innovative, and it is. But when you think about the fact that actually the concept was potentially, was born all those many years ago. With and one of the innovators was your grandfather. It's just an incredible thing, and whether we're doing full circle or whether it's just different ways that departments work now, I think it's amazing just to hear those stories and how it's giving you your sort of inspiration to think how things could be done differently, right?
Absolutely. And I think so the connection between sort of reading, for example, about the sort of Fuji XR and what pathways that can help to influence, facilitate change, make more patient care community based, all of these things, and what that role of that car can do does mirror what it was doing back then. But I think it's the landscape of healthcare in between the two that has sort of not lent itself well to that. And obviously, I think radiation in itself and sort of guidance, IRMA, all of it, that has presented us with a challenge in the meantime. Because once we actually learned that you don't x-ray pregnant people and all this sort of stuff, actually we've gone, whoa, we can't just be doing it anywhere, which I absolutely get. But because now technology has become so collimation has become so defined, everything, actually it makes it more doable in your more remote settings because the technology is moving with the times. And I think we need to embrace that. And for example, the XR or XR, in fact, I don't know why I'm saying XR, is an opportunity to take radiographers' roles to another level, but actually for radiographers not to be protective about our roles, but to take the opportunity to work with other professions to share those roles. We've always been very protective, and that's one thing about the radiography profession, which I have found frustrating over the years, because I think in a sense it has left us behind in some situations. For example, your other AHPs, physios, for example, they seem much more open. But I think what it is actually radiation that has, I'm not saying damaged us, that sounds a little bit rough. Maybe it has for some of us. But I always joke about radiographers being a certain breed, and I've always said, I know I'm not the same, and I probably am, but at the same point, I don't think I am the same in the sense of being protective about what our profession is, because actually we're at a point where if we share some of those clinical practices with other professions, whatever they may be, whether it be taking bloods, prescribing, whatever it may be. I know there's legal challenges with all of that, but they're pathways that we should be able to significantly influence. And for example, the car, a one-stop shop. We have one-stop clinics in all other areas. Why don't we have it in Plainfield? So
recently we ran an event with the Society and College on wellbeing. I was not prepared for one of the questions that came out, which made a complete lot of sense, was around the well-being that this person, whoever it was, I think it was an anonymous, that attributed their own well-being to the fact of the lack of awareness of the profession amongst general public. And I thought, wow. And if you want to do some sort of root cause analysis about some of the things you mentioned about protectionism in the profession itself, I mean, some of it, you can be quite protective because you're like, well, I'm a radiographer, and actually the thought process that you could associate potentially, and I'm not saying this could be the exception more than the norm, but I've just found it interesting. Someone mentioned that their own well-being was associated with how little people know about them as a profession, you as a professional.
Yeah, you know what, that is really interesting, because actually I think so. Tiny bit of a rabbit hole, and I won't go too far down it. However, I think for example, my own children, my eldest son, he's he's starting to look at careers, and so are his friends. He's 15. Now, we target careers education probably a bit older than that. So this is the age that we're missing a trick, and even younger. So I have been that mum going into schools and showing x-rays when they were little, like x-rays, and we'd put, on those sort of portable classrooms, and we'd put all the x-rays on the windows, and they had to try and guess what part of the body it was or whatever it was. And we had some right fun doing that. Now, a lot of friends, they remember that. Now, we as a profession, I don't think do that very well.
No.
Because there's a lot of talk from nurses, doctors there are, but not in at the same sort of level. But even physios and stuff, they do other stuff. But we as a profession just don't seem to. We don't get that mention on the BBC News. We don't get, and I think we really should. But we don't. I think we've been, it goes back to the point of being a little bit too protective around what we are. But the fact that we've got somebody who's asked that question on a wellbeing and made a point on a wellbeing session, that absolutely correlates with what I'm seeing.
Yep.
Is that we want to be valued, don't we? And that is key to any employment, really, and way of life.
Val, with that in mind, the whole vision, and I've shared this fairly often now with the Skilled Personnel Network, is, albeit it's a platform for radiographers as a community, which will be, discussed amongst radiographers. Actually, it is to build confidence. It's about self-efficacy. It's about how we can generate a sense of community around radiographers, and then what we can do is disseminate that to really help build awareness amongst students, about school people, school leavers thinking about their next move, amongst people that are thinking about career changes, but also, as I say, to help develop the careers of radiographers so they can feel absolutely like they have the ability to be able to go out amongst them and shout loud and proud about what you guys do. With that in mind, not that I've led you down the path to say the same thing I was saying, but what advice would you give to radiographers now, about them thinking about their crossroads and their careers, people thinking about coming into the profession? What advice would you give?
What I'd give is, no question, whether in any part of life, is a stupid question. I've seen too many times that people are made to feel those questions are stupid, and they're really not. So the whole imposter syndrome, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. We all go through it. We all absolutely go through it, but still continue, still drive. One of the things I've always said is, and I say to the kids, is the sky's the limit. I don't always practice what I preach, because I'm, although I can speak and public speak, sometimes, you do question your own confidence in what you are and what you're delivering. But at the same point, if you work within your values and you demonstrate those values and navigate crossroads in your profession to incorporate those values, that's never wrong. Never look back, only forward. And that's how I see life, full stop. So it's a case of learning from what you've already learned, but actually some of that learning may not have been the best, but it's still learning. And you can go on and take any opportunity along the way and do, like skilled personnel, use the forum to be able to ask a question, because it's definitely not a stupid question. Where do I make that initial contact with the profession? Where do I haven't got all the answers, but we can work together on it to work out how to. So yeah, that would be my point really, is nothing's off limits. Every CrossRoADS is there for a reason in hindsight. And whatever path you take, it will take you down the right one.
That's a great.
That'd be my thought.
Fred?
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, Val, honestly, I mean, we are definitely, as I say, going to get you back on again, because there's things the rabbit holes that we've gone down today. There's so many things we could discuss. We definitely need to discuss grandfather's mobile X-ray service. We even though we spoke about some of your moves into radiographer reporting, we haven't spoke about the CRAG and your route into consultant radiographers route. But actually, what I'd love to be able to do is do a separate workshop or a separate webinar on that, around how you get involved with being part of advisory groups and how you got into that as well. So thank you very much, Boz. Is there any final words from you, sir?
Oh, I can't top those inspirational words.
I try to practice what I preach, but it is hard sometimes.
That's all we can do, though, isn't it? Keep true to your own values and try and work through that.
Yeah,
that's all you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Val, thank you very, very much for being such an amazing guest today. So I really, really enjoyed today's podcast, and I hope, and I'm pretty sure everyone else who's listening will have as well. And don't forget, we go out to an international audience as well, so it'll be interesting as we get this out to the masses, hearing people's feedback as well. Thank you very, very much for everyone who's joining, and we'll look forward to being part of another podcast soon. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the invite.